Thank you, Laura. So I'll just quickly finish up here. So our course schedule, of course, today is our third webinar. We'll meet again for a fourth time on Monday at 2 o'clock Eastern, same place and same time. You're, of course, more than welcome to work towards a certificate of completion. And if you are interested in doing so, we ask that you turn in all your homework assignments no later than Wednesday, November 6th. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to call or email us. We're here to help you. So, to move on to our topic, I am so pleased to introduce today our speaker, Linda Taddick. Linda is the Executive Director for the Audiovisual Archive Network, an independent nonprofit digital library and preservation service for historical sound and moving image collections. She consults and lectures on digital asset management, audiovisual and digital preservation, and metadata with a diverse group of clients. And from 2004 to 2011, Linda was an adjunct professor at NYU's Moving Image Archiving and Preservation Graduate Degree Program. She has more than 25 years of experience working with and managing audiovisual, digital, and broadcasting, and has also served previously as the president of the Association of Moving Image Archivists. Linda, we are so happy to have you on board today. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Jenny. Hello, everyone. And thank you to the Heritage Preservation, CCAHA, for inviting me to participate in this webinar. Now, I do have apologies for the large number of PowerPoint slides for those of you who have downloaded the PDF version of the presentation, but there are many, many formats, video formats, and in order to identify them, I definitely wanted to give you some detailed images, and in fact, the color version of the PowerPoint presentation is very important because so many aspects of identification of video formats actually relies on color. What is the color of the video cassette? So let's get going here. So what we'll be covering today are the physical properties, and not just of video, but also of optical media, preservation issues for all the media, and formats and identification. What we will not be covering is digitization. That's going to be covered next week. Cataloging and metadata, which I know some of you were hoping it would be covered. However, we will not be covering that as well. So the resources that are online, there's a bibliography of web-based readings. There is a list of video preservation labs in the U.S. I'm sorry for those of you not in the U.S., but these are folks who definitely have experience in working with archival video preservation with many archives around the world, actually. And then there is a list of current video formats which we will be referring to during the presentation. Now there is an additional resource up there which I put up there, basically just listing all the formats, video formats, which we will be discussing today as a kind of a cheat sheet for you to keep track, because we're going to cover like 30 formats. There's a lot. So let's get started. We're going to start with video. In brief, if it has sprockets, it's film. It's not video. Now, those of you who attended Sarah Stodderman's presentation on audio, you probably have already heard some of this information, where audio tape and videotape, they're both magnetic media. So video shares some aspects of physical properties with audio tape as well. Video can come in reel or cassette form, so sometimes it can be confusing to identify, oh, is this video or is it audio? And also video can carry both analog and digital signals, just like audio tape. So the primary concerns with video is that, boy, there are just so many formats, so identification can be difficult. You have format obsolescence. Why are there so many formats? Well, many of them have become obsolete over time. It has a short life expectancy, and the concerns as well for like any of the environmental, organic, any inherent parts of the medium that can contribute to signal degradation, and also what you human beings can be doing to disturb or deteriorate that video. So how did Videotape started? Well, thank you, Bing Crosby. Okay, he actually first started funding development of audio tape because as he was doing radio broadcasts, he wanted to perfect his performance, and so he wanted to record in advance. And then he decided to do the same thing with video. Since television had come around, he wanted to record his television performances. So he gave funding to Ampex, a startup, to start developing magnetic videotape. So the original market was in broadcasting. Now, like other time-based media, even though it started out in broadcasting, it quickly then became, there were formats that were developed for the consumer market. Now, videotape was never, ever intended as a preservation medium. Now, there are over 60 formats that have been introduced since 1956. And unfortunately, most are obsolete, and we're going to be covering 30 of them today. But before we start delving into them, let's first try to understand the general preservation concerns that are based on videotape's physical properties. So here we go. Now this diagram here is from Van Bogaert's CLEAR document on magnetic tape storage and handling, and I believe it's also a reference for several other presentations or webinars in this series. So just quickly, because you can actually look at the document, it's a really wonderful document. On the very bottom, you have the backcoat. That's a thin ribbon on which everything else sits on top. The substrate is made of polyester, and it is the carrier on which the binder and the magnetic particles sit. The binder, which is that orange area there, on the top of it, that holds the magnetic particles which contain the information. It holds the lubricant, and so in a way, like the metaphor that's often used is like Jell-O. Basically, it's Jell-O with marshmallows and fruit, and it's all held on top by the top coat, which acts as a skin. Now, all of these properties have some problems. Of the 6, there are 4 that contribute to signal degradation. So we're going to go quickly through each of these and discuss what some of the issues are with them. So the binder. Now, the binder holds magnetic particles. That's the information again. And this is unfortunately the weakest in videotape. Because if there's moisture in the air, and I know that several of you who have signed on are in very high humidity environments, so this is a big concern, it can contribute to hydrolysis, or commonly called sticky shed syndrome. So the binder starts breaking apart, and when it starts breaking apart, the magnetic particles are then shed. That's why it's like sticky. The binder starts breaking apart, becomes sticky, and the magnetic particles then get shed when the tape is played. Now, the shedding tapes can also then damage tapes that are then played in the deck after this one videotape that is shedding, because then it can stick on it, it can damage the subsequent tapes. And then once you start losing magnetic particles, then from the shedding, it can cause dropouts in the signal. Now, one of the resources that is on your bibliography is the Artifact Atlas, which is hosted at BEDAC, which is a video preservation organization in the San Francisco Bay Area. And so I encourage you to look at these actual examples of dropout and some of the other problems that we'll be discussing. Hydrolysis can also cause mold on tapes. And again, those of you who live in high humidity environments, you probably already have moldy tapes. And this photograph here is from Quad Tape Transfer, and this website also has several other images of mold and some deterioration problems, focusing on 2-inch quad tapes, but still it's applicable to most video formats. So how can you treat hydrolysis? Once it starts, it can't be permanently stopped. Now, you can bake tapes in a convection oven, of course, more of a scientific convection oven, not the one you might have in your kitchen. If you have the experience in order to do this, you can probably set up a lab, and if you have enough tapes, you can set up a lab to do it in your own facility. However, I highly recommend that you take it to a professional to have it baked. Once it is baked, then you have to transfer the content pretty soon after it has been baked while it's been stabilized. Treating the mold, you must carefully remove that mold. And again, I would highly recommend, unless you have a lab set up to deal with mold, that you take it to a professional to have that mold cleaned off. Because not only can you ruin the tape if you don't know how to do it correctly, but you can also damage your health by breathing in the mold spores. Okay, lubricant, that's the second component of videotape after binder that we'll talk about. The lubricant helps the tape move through the decks, as you might imagine. However, it just naturally dries out over time, and especially hot and dry environments will accelerate it. So dry tapes can become brittle, and they can get stuck in those playback decks, which will then damage the tapes. So to treat this lubricant loss, they can be relubricated, but again, take it to a professional, because if you over-lubricate it, it can cause signal loss. Okay, the magnetic particles, this is critical because, again, these store the information and they're held in the binder. And any magnetic particle loss is irretrievable. There is nothing you can do about it. So if you have magnetic particle degradation, how do you know? It's because you'll have diminished hue or color and reduced sound. So, and there are several different kinds of magnetic particles. So the first ones were iron oxide. Then they started to improve on that, and they developed cobalt-doped iron oxide. This is for all the chemists out there. Then they developed chromium oxide, or CrO2, which you would find available in some early VHS tapes and in small format cassettes. Now, all of these have oxide in the names, and the thing is, moisture plus oxide equals rust. And so oxide-based magnetic particles, they can degrade in high humidity environments. So trying to take care of that problem, then we have the barium ferrite magnetic particles were developed. It has a longer life expectancy than the metal particulate, or MP, which I'm going to discuss next, but it's not as efficient for recording. So most tapes today are created with metal particulate pigments or magnetic particles, and it's been used from BetaSP to the present. And so these MP particles, they are coated for protection against the moisture in the air, so they can, not deteriorate as quickly within a high humidity environment, but on the other hand, if they really get immersed in water, then it's very difficult to restore these tapes. Now, ME tapes, so we'll be hearing about ME quite a bit during this presentation, metal evaporated tapes. They don't have a binder, and the magnetic particles are laid down directly on the tape substrate. You will find these in the very small format cassettes, which you might have in your collections, DVCAM, Mini DV, the High 8, the Digital 8 tapes. They have a thinner magnetic coating, so the tapes are more fragile. Just think, these little tiny cassettes, which basically look like audio cassettes, you can store up to 2 hours of content, so these are very thin tapes. They're very fragile. If you do repeated playing, or if you leave of the tapes, or if you leave them in pause, it can damage the tape, which can result in particle loss. And so archivists, again, this isn't a standard, but it's more like anecdotal quotes that we all say, is like, we follow a 5-play rule. So don't play any of these ME tapes more than 5 times, and then you have to transfer it. So avoiding particle loss, again, once it is gone, it is gone. So keep the tapes cool and dry, just to try to slow down the loss. Transfer content from those ME tapes, those small ones I was just discussing, as soon as possible. Don't leave tapes in pause. Don't play them more than 5 times before you transfer them. And then, of course, if you see evidence of metal particle loss, then you should transfer that content right away. Okay, the substrate, this is another component of videotape. This is made of polyester, varying thickness depending on the format, and this supports the magnetic coating, the binder, and everything else that's on it. So it's chemically stable because it is polyester, but it can stretch. And if it can be stretched by a poor tape pack, which we'll get into in a little bit, and high humidity and temperature. And if it stretches, though, the control track can be damaged, and the tape won't run through the deck. So the control track, now this isn't a physical property, but it impacts whether an analog tape can be read. The control track, it basically acts like a film sprocket. It's a pulse that's on the tape along the edge that drives the tape through the videotape recorder, the VTR, according to the speed that's recorded on the control track. So if it's damaged, you can have dropouts on the tape. It will ruin the sync between the tape and the VTR, and you can also see glitches. So to avoid substrate deformation, so again, store tapes in a cool and dry environment. That's like the mantra. Make sure the tape has an even pack with no pop strands. Hopefully you can see this on this image where you can see there's some ridges on that tape. That's bad. So, make sure that it's as flat as possible. Okay, so basic parts of videotape conservation. So videotape life expectancy. So now this doesn't mean a fixed expiration date like it's all of a sudden going to disappear on December 31st, 2013, but it means that there is the tape or the signal is starting to deteriorate, and so you really should transfer that content. So for videotape in general, it's between 5 to 50 years, but of course it definitely depends on the format and the tape stock and the storage environment. So what can you do then to extend that life expectancy? Little steps. You can just make sure that tape, every single video cassette-based tape, not reels, but cassette-based tapes, they have some kind of record and save tab or button on it. And what we'll do as we go through the formats is I'll be pointing out to you where you can find these Save Record buttons. Make sure it is turned off to save. Okay, store the tape standing up like books, because if they're stored flat, gravity will loosen the tightness of the tape pack. And again, the tape should have an even flat line with no pop strands. Wind to the head or to the end. Don't ever leave the tape exposed in the plate to invite moisture from the humidity in the air to come into the tape and can damage the tape. Rehouse the tapes to inert plastic containers, and you should prioritize rehousing the tapes that are already in There are some tapes that are in cardboard containers because, again, the cardboard, the acid in the paper accelerates hydrolysis and mold. And likewise, remove any paper inserts, like you might have extra labels or other kind of information that's on paper inside the cases. That could hold important information. Definitely save the paper, but take it out of the container and make sure that you have some kind of metadata to link the videotape to whatever insert you took out if it has important information on it. Now, the macro environment or the storage environment. Don't store tapes in non-archival or stock boxes, and oftentimes you'll just see archives which are just storing the videotapes in the videotape stock, the manufacturer's stock box that it came in. But take it out of there, put them in archival boxes, because again, the cardboard will accelerate hydrolysis. Use metal shelves, definitely not wood, because the wood attracts moisture. Keep them in cool and dry environments, and we'll go through the ANSI standard in just a second for what the ideal environment should be. And the good news is that magnetic media does not need to be stored in as cold an environment as film. Here is the ANSI standard for term, medium-term, and long-term storage. So again, what you'll notice here, just quickly going through it, you'll see for short-term storage it can be in a higher temperature, but it has to be in a lower relative humidity. Medium term is in the middle, long-term storage, so it should be cold and dry. So let's go into some other tips. Don't ever store your videotape above 65% relative humidity. Now, I know that that can be very difficult for those of you who are in very high humidity environments, but that is at the rate when fungal growth will occur. You'll start having mold on your tapes. And videotape shouldn't be stored below 45 degrees Fahrenheit, and that is actually a manufacturer recommendation because storage below that can result in binder breakdown. Storage general tips. The higher temperature must be balanced by lower humidity. Fluctuations can actually be more damaging to the tape than having some tape consistently stored at a high temperature or humidity. So prioritization, let's talk about this, and then we're going to jump into the formats. Now, the oldest tape should not necessarily be preserved first. Now, of course, now we're just talking about the media itself. Of course, you have your own, based on content, you might want to prioritize transferring tape, but that is, based on your own rules on what is important content. But for the physical properties of the tapes, then consider the condition of the tape, the inherent format stability, which we'll be going over when we discuss the individual formats, the storage environment that the tape has been in over its entire storage life, and how often it has been used. So how would you prioritize? This is going to be a poll question. So keep an eye on those of you who have printed out the handout already, you can be musing over this as we go through and discuss the various formats. So I've given you 3 examples. An old tape, that's the 2-inch video reel. A middle child, that's the 3/4-inch U-matic, and then the younger kid on the block is the mini DV. And so it describes the age, it describes the different storage environments they've been in over time, and how often they've been used, and whether they're obsolete. So we're going to come back to this poll at slide 159. Yes, we have 100 more slides to go through, but it will go quickly, I promise. And at that point, then you'll complete the poll, and then we'll see what you all think after hearing about all these various formats. Okay, quickly, Amy, like 1 or 2 questions on conservation actions before we go into the formats.
Yes, Linda. We did have a few questions that came up, and one that I thought was really relevant to a lot of people here. There's Aaron from Louisville, Kentucky said he had a question about that a lot of meetings at AMIA and IASA, there have been a lot of talk about not bothering to rehouse videos because they have such a short lifespan anytime to basically save your money for transfer instead. Do you have any comment on that?
I think that if collections, if you have thousands of videotapes, then yes, you might as well just, put the cost towards transferring right away. On the other hand, though, if you know that you won't be able to transfer them, I mean, these videotapes, again, it depends on the storage, how long they might, their life expectancy could be. So if you have videotapes that are in cardboard containers, I would definitely rehouse those right away. You don't have to rehouse everything, but go and identify the ones that are most important. And then segregate them, though, from the videotapes that are still going to be in cardboard containers or in cardboard boxes, because so then they aren't impacted by any of the moisture that might come in the air in the, based on the acidic qualities of those boxes or the containers.
Great. I have one more question for you. I think your discussion of the metal evaporated tapes kind of scared some people, that 5-play rule. Some people were saying that a lot of their collections had been put onto that format for preservation purposes, and other folks are wondering, does that go by any other names, any brand names that they should be aware of to look out for?
Well, as we go through the tapes that have ME, you'll notice that in the handouts, in the slides, which they can, of course, refer to. Great, you guys did such a great job in making the PDFs of those. I'm going to show you how you can identify whether a tape, regardless of the manufacturer, where you can look for the ME or the MP symbol. So you can go through and you can identify what tapes are metal evaporated.
Great. So I know you have tons of information to get to, so we'll try and address more questions later, though.
Okay, great. Right, so let's keep on going, and let's start talking about formats. Format obsolescence. Okay, what does obsolete mean in this context? Well, the stock is no longer manufactured, and the playback equipment is no longer manufactured with old decks in limited supply. And it's the lack of access to playback equipment that is the most critical factor here for obsolescence, because if you don't have something to play the tape back on, you can't preserve it. So that's what you really need to pay attention to. Endangered can be where the format, rather than being obsolete, if there is an adequate supply of operating playback decks that you can acquire, but those are still endangered because the decks themselves are no longer being manufactured. So the wake-up call, this is one of the handouts that I have provided to you all. The video stock and decks manufactured as of October 2013. Now this list here, this chart, is not meant to tell you, oh, these are the formats you should be transferring to, because you really should try to move away from transferring content from video to video. But what this is just telling you, look on that right part of the sheet where it lists the decks and the decks which are being manufactured, and I have a column there for combo units. So if a format no longer has a dedicated format playback deck, that's in that Sony and Panasonic column, so basically they're creating decks where you can play multiple formats, you should probably go out and try, if you intend to do transferring or playback of the formats of any of these formats, you should go out now and buy those decks, especially the dedicated decks if you can afford it, or the combo units. Anyway, so that's the purpose of that handout. So digitization is preservation. As I just mentioned, you pretty much, that's all you can do. You have to digitize for preservation because video is going away. It is dying. Before transferring, now we're going to go through formats really quickly. I might not be able to get to all of them at the end, but what I want to do is help you to be able to identify the format that you have. To help you identify the tapes are identified just basically by a visual identification, the maximum running time of that tape, because a label might say that a work is 21 minutes and 30 seconds, but how can you really trust it? And you're going to be either wanting to transfer it yourself in-house, and so you want to estimate then what would be your digital storage if you're digitizing it, or if you're sending it out, you want to be able to tell the vendor, well, this is the format, and this is roughly then the running time, the maximum running time, so they can give you an estimate. And then you need to identify the broadcast standard, NTSC, which is used here in the U.S., PAL, which is used in the majority of the rest of the world, and CCAM, which is the broadcast standard in French-speaking countries. So format identification, learn how to identify the physical format and its required playback equipment. So as I mentioned before, videotape comes in two packages. There's a reel, and look, this kind of looks like an audio tape, but it's video. And it comes in cassette forms and of many kinds of sizes and colors. So now we're going to jump into the formats. We're going to start with the oldest, going quickly through them. That's the 2-inch quad, half-inch, and 1-inch. So the first videotape format was a 2-inch quad developed by Ampex in 1956, as we just learned from Bing Crosby's financial support. And as you can see, it was installed in broadcasting organizations. It first recorded only black and white with color added a few years later. And you can see here that, it immediately started winning technical Emmys, and people wanted it. They could understand the value. Here's a picture of that first 2-inch quad, and look at the cost of it. Boy, not only was the deck itself expensive, the tape was expensive, and then you could only play it 30 times before you could damage the tape. Excuse me, I need to get a little bit of water. Okay, now I wanted to just show you some pictures of the equipment and how the tape is threaded through the deck. Now, I need to give credit to an organization, Altrin Technologies, broadcaststore.com, which let me come into their facility for an afternoon and take over and photograph the vast majority of the formats and the equipment you'll see here. They were really very generous. And then let's go through the tape threading. So those of you who are familiar with film flatbeds, this should look a little bit familiar here. So the tape comes in here, and then it goes across the head, and then it goes out here from the right. So look, it looks very, very similar to a film playback deck. This is what the case might look like. 2-inch reel case. They're very large, and they get to 20 pounds. They're very heavy. The width of the tape, just so that you can see, so we have the 2-inch on the right, and then we have a 1-inch for comparison on the left. And if you want to try, now the reel sizes can come in a variety of sizes, and the size, of course, determines then the running time. So the chart there at Quad Tape Transfer gives you a chart there for identifying, okay, this is the reel size, and this could be the maximum running time of the tape. Format-specific problems for 2-inch video reel is the reel itself, not the tape, which is the foam flange. We're going to look at a picture of that, and then it has glue as well as the foam, and that can deteriorate, and that can get onto the tape. Some of the 2-inch containers also have shedding foam that then sticks to the tape. And here's an example, a photo from Quad Tape Transfer. On the right, you'll see that the foam flange is one that has that little edge around the side. Then if it's flat, with that metal flat reel, that does not have foam. So here are types of foam underneath. If you opened up that reel, this is what it would look like, and then there's an example of foam deterioration there on the right. And so again, what happens is that foam can just come off onto the tape and get it all gooey, so it has to get cleaned off before transfer. Summary, this is obsolete, definitely obsolete. No decks, very rare to actually find a deck or parts or find a vendor who can transfer it. Half-inch open reel was actually the next format that was developed. It was a prosumer format. It was a portable deck with an attached camera. It's used, you might find in your collections from public access television, meeting recordings, schools use it, video artists, so lots of video artists use this format, and for ENG or electronic news gathering. There are two versions, but the EIAJ is the one that became the standard. So here's a picture of a deck from Scene Savers, thanks to them. Now look at this. It looks like an audio, reel-to-reel player. But you know it's not an audio reel-to-reel player because you can see color, because audio tape, of course, wasn't colored, didn't have a picture. And also then you would have the model number, so you could do the research on that. This is what the cases might look like. Here's an example on the left with a Memorex, and then the one on the right, this is a half-inch tape case where it feels a bit like soft plastic, and it opens up like a book or like a DVD jewel case. Half-inch open reel, again, it looks a bit like it could be an audio reel, which I have an example of it down there on the right, especially because audio reels can also come in the same size as that half-inch open reel. So we have half-inch videotape width, and then we have a 1/4 inch audio tape width on the right. Now, of course, that's leader. That's not actually tape there on the right. You can also have half-inch audio tape, so that's why it's very critical to be able to actually look at the hub, the reel itself, and see if it says video on it. The running time would be roughly 30 minutes. Can be black and white or color. And again, like 2-inch quad is obsolete, and it's extremely rare to find both the DEX parts and to find a facility that can transfer it. 1-inch open reel was then developed after the 2-inch tape to become the next studio or broadcasting format, much more portable. It could be used in the studio and also out in the field. And also archives used it. Those of you who did preservation of video in the 80s and into the 90s, it was often used as the preservation format for transferring other videotape formats. These are what the decks look like. And the case looks very similar to the 2-inch, it's just that it's 1-inch. Here is 1-inch tape width. Here's, I think that slide somehow is gone. Oh well. The tape width, 1-inch again compared to the 2-inch. The summary is where it is obsolete. However, you can find used decks and parts because it had such wide use in broadcasting. So there are many decks that are still out there that can be found. So let's look into the formats that you probably have a lot of these formats in your collections, the older cassette formats. 3/4 inch U-matic, you notice that that's the last one that actually refers to the width of the tape in its name, or how it's referred to. So we're going to look at these in some detail. So the U-matic was the first one that was developed, 71, U-matic SP. It came out in 86. So it replaced 16 millimeter film for electronic news gathering. You'll see it in two sizes. One is a small cassette, which is 20 minutes, and a large cassette for 30 or 60. Now, one of the unique problems with these, and again, this is anecdotal rather than in some official guidebook, is that archives have noticed that some stock batches in the first 10 years have noticeable dropouts. So if you have 3/4 inch U-matic, not U-matic SP, but U-matics in your collection, then from this time period, you probably should take a look at them and start transferring them. Visual identification is there. I'm going to get into the actual pictures of them. Here are the decks. Now, the top one is the U-matic deck. The bottom one is the U-matic SP deck, which can also then play U-matic decks. I'm sorry, U-matic tapes. Now, somebody who had signed up to the webinar, they actually attached an image of this exact kind of tape. So and they're wondering, what is this? Well, what you have is a U-matic tape, and it's a 20-minute small cassette. You can tell that it's 20 minutes here, and so this is where we're going to start going into how can you identify the maximum running time. There it is on that right bottom side. Down there, it's 20 minutes. U-matic 60, again, we're not talking about U-matic SP. This is just U-matic. Here's a 60-minute cassette. Here is this red button. This is the only format that has this red button on the back of it, and that is the record save button. Take those out. Pop those out and use them as confetti, but you need to remove them so that they're not accidentally recorded over. Now we're jumping into SP. So the U-matic SP, here's a small cassette. There again is that red button there on the right. Now here's how you can identify whether whether your tape is a U-matic or a U-matic SP. Okay, so look here. See, there's no hole there, and there is a hole above the red button there. If it has a hole above the red button, that means it's an SP tape. If it does not have a hole, then that means it is a U-matic. And what this was a sign, because again, this is from the analog, not the digital era. If the U-matic SP then was just the deck itself would know whether it was playing an SP tape or a regular U-matic tape based on whether there was a hole or not. Okay, how do you find out the maximum running time? It's on the spine, so there's 20, so you know that that's a 20-minute tape. Summary, this is an obsolete to endangered format. The last deck was manufactured in 2008, and it's actually becoming difficult to find these decks and to find them where they have usable parts. Betamax. Now, Betamax. Some of you probably have Betamax in your collections, even though VHS won the format war. And even though Sony lost that war, it used the Betamax tape, the format, as the foundation for its suite of Betacam suites of formats. So here's a Betamax deck. It's top loading. Here's the tape. How can you tell that it is a Betamax tape and not some other kind of beta tape? Well, there's that telltale B, that little script kind of B that's on the tape up in the right corner. The summary, well, it is obsolete. The last deck was 2002. The active date range was up until 1986. Okay, VHS then, that won the war. So it was a consumer cassette-based format but it still was used to record original content like home movies, schools, recorded events, local government event documentation. And you can still find the tape stock is still manufactured today, although very limited, and you can only find the VCRs as part of combo DVD VHS units. And you have to be very careful because there are several formats that look like VHS tapes, but they aren't. So here's a professional VHS deck. Here's the front, here's the back, and here is where you can find the running time here. And then also this is the record save tab. You have to break that off. Okay, the summary, the last dedicated deck was manufactured in 2008. Now let's jump into the Betacam formats. I'm going to go through some of these formats really quickly because I don't want to run out of time. But I want to spend some time on the Betacam formats and also then on the smaller formats, the 8mm formats and then the mini DV formats. So let's just go through this as quickly as we can. So Betacam formats. So when somebody says, oh, I have a beta tape, you have to make sure, well, are they talking about Betamax? Or are they talking about Betacam, BetaSP, DigiBeta? Which beta is it? So the first Betacam formats were analog, and they were standard def, or SD. Okay, Betacam was developed in 1982. It is half-inch, just as the Betamax and also VHS tapes are half-inch in width. It has metal particles, which are the barium ferrite magnetic particles. Here is the Betacam front. Here is the tape back. And you can see the record save tabs for all of the Betacam formats tend to be on the side. Okay, the maximum running time, you can find it on the spine and also there on the back lower left. So that says it's a 10-minute tape. Summary, it is obsolete. The stock is not manufactured. You can play Betacam tapes, though, in a combo unit. Okay, BetaSP then was the next one. SP is for superior performance, and this was the first tape stock that used the MP, or metal particulate. It's a professional format that was used in broadcasting. Uh-oh. Looks like we've lost some of the slide images. Here we go. Okay. BetaSP decks. Look, there are 4 different kinds of decks that I have here. There's just a recorder, there's a player, and you can see here that down in the bottom right, there is a PAL dedicated deck. And what that means is, again, that's a broadcast standard. You need to know if you have PAL or NTSC or CCAM. So this is a PAL dedicated deck. Okay, the BetaSP tape, here's examples of the front, the back, and again, the record save tab is on the side. The tape maximum running time, you'll find that on the cassette lid. So this is a 60-minute tape. And the summary is the dedicated decks are no longer created. They're no longer manufactured. They can be played in a combo unit, and you can still find some used decks and parts available. So continuing with the Betacam formats, now we're going to go into the digital formats. But the digital, the SD, the standard def, not the high def formats. So these were the digital Betacam. or digibeta, and then there are some other broadcasting formats. So the digital Betacam came out in 1993. It is standard def. I'm not going to go through this technical information on what the digital signal is. You guys can read that on your handouts. It is a professional format, and it is also a common physical preservation format still used in archives. In fact, in the Digital Dilemma 2 report that came out from the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, it was determined that public archives, if they're not transferring video to digital files, what they tend to be transferring to is digital Betacam if they don't have the digital preservation infrastructure. So people are still using digibeta, even though it seems like the decks are no longer being manufactured. There's an email out from Sony about 2 years ago saying they're going to stop manufacturing the decks, even though you can go onto their professional site and see that they're still selling the deck. So digibeta tapes come in two sizes, small and large. Here is the back, and you can see there's that record save tab, and then down here you have the tape maximum running time. The summary is, and I have, for the active date range, I have 2012 with a question mark, just because, again, it's not certain if they really have truly stopped manufacturing a dedicated digibeta deck, but you still can play them in a couple of combo units, and they're definitely widely available. Okay, now we're going to go through some of the more professional broadcasting tapes, which I'll just go really quickly through because you might find them in your collections. Betacam SX, again, these are standard def. This is a highly compressed signal. Decks no longer made. These are yellow. This is where the color coding comes into play. So if it's Betacam SX, you will see the cases and the tapes are in yellow. You will find the record save tab again on the side and the maximum running time. The maximum running time both on the lid here and also then down there on the back. Okay, the summary is where, again, there are no more dedicated decks that are being created. The tapes can be played in a combo unit. And let's keep going to the MPEG IMX. So this is another Betacam digital format, which plays an MPEG 2 flavor. Is, again, another professional broadcasting format. So here's an example of the MPEG IMX tape. So again, you have the running time, which can be on the lid here, and also down here in the left back bottom corner. The record save tab, again, is on the side. So again, they look exactly the same size, both the SX and the IMX, just different colors. So this is where the color coding comes into play. IMX is the same as SX, where the stock is still manufactured, but there's no dedicated deck, and it can be played in combo units. The HD Betacam formats, so these are the last of the Betacam formats that we're discussing. That's the HDCAM format, and the first one was developed out in 1997. It is a professional format. The HDCAM tapes, not the HDCAM SR, but the HDCAM tapes have an orange lid. It has two maximum running times because the camera, if you're recording directly in camera, then they're all the same size. You have to look at the color coding and also what it's called, of course, on the tape itself to identify what format it is. The SR format, which is the format that is in most common use today if people are still using videotape professionally, is where it can record even up to 2K resolution, and even some TV shows, some sports events are recorded on it as well. There was a big shortage of HDCAM SR tapes back in 2011 from the Japanese tsunami when the one facility that creates these tapes was flooded. So that was really also another wake-up call to the whole industry saying, oops, we don't have videotape anymore. We need to start going digital. HDCAM SR tapes have a cyan-colored lid. They have two maximum running times again. So these are still, this is pretty much the only professional grade format that is still in active production. Both the stock and the decks are being manufactured. So let's go into the small formats that are out there. So there's 8mm tapes, which were developed for the camcorder market. They're pretty much the size of an audio cassette. And then they have been superseded by the mini DV formats. Of the 8mm formats, I want to just give you a heads up there that look at if it's what's the metal particles. There's MP, and then you have high 8, which is MP and ME. And of these formats, high 8 is still being manufactured. So here's a high 8 deck, no longer manufactured. Here you can see here, is it MP or ME? This one is telling you that is an MP. It's metal P plus it says MP. Oops, I'm sorry. Here you go. There it is. You can see that that is MP right here. High 8 tape back. So you have the record save tab is here on the spine. That's over here on the edge. High 8 tape can come in both MP and ME. So again, somebody was asking, how do you know from different manufacturers what is what? Well, here it says MP, and then here it says ME. So you really have to look to try to identify if you have an ME tape. Okay, 8mm video summary. So of all of them, the only stock that is being manufactured is the high 8 tape. The DV tapes formats. So you probably have a lot of these in your collections because they're commonly used for oral histories and for also just recording events. So let's just go into these. The tape width is 1/4 inch, and all of these formats are standard def except for you can record HDV and also DVCPRO HD. Okay, the mini DV tapes, 1995. Started out in 1995. It captures a DV signal or a DV25. Again, I'm really sorry. I'm going to skip over the technical information because there isn't time. All mini DV tapes are ME. They're metal evaporated. So that's a critical thing for you to remember. Mini DV tapes are very tiny. Look at this. It's not even like 3 inches long. And they have 2 running times based on how it is being recorded in the camera. And you note again that it is ME. Here you go. There's where it says ME. Mini DV tape back, and then the record save window is along the spine at the side. Mini DV tapes can also be used for both DV and for HDV recording. It just depends on the camera that's being used. So you can see it's HDV and DV. Summary is for mini DV. It is still in current use, and it can still be played back in a combo unit. DVCAM, then 1995. Sony developed this. Also DV25 stream. Captures at a higher speed, though, and all DVCAM tapes are ME. Okay, here's a DVCAM deck that can also play mini DV tapes. And here's an example of a DVCAM tape. Okay, again, look here, there's ME right there, so you can tell what it is. Here's an example of the DVCAM record on and one off. So the off, you can see the red in the window. DVCAM Summary, again, it's 1/4 inch, and it is still in current production. The stock is still being manufactured, and you can still play it in several different kinds of combo units. Okay, moving on to DVCPRO. So this was developed by Panasonic, and it comes in 3 different flavors, DVCPRO, DVCPRO 50, and then HD. And again, you might have these in your collections because it can be used for oral histories independent production. DVCPRO media are interchangeable. So basically, depending on your camera, you can record DVCPRO 50 on a DVCPRO tape. And all DVCPRO tapes are MP, not ME, and that was a purposeful decision by Panasonic because Panasonic believed that the ME tapes did not have as long life expectancy and were not as durable, and so they specifically wanted to make MP tapes. So here are some examples of some decks. Now, if you have a small DVCPRO tape, you have to use that adapter, which is there on the right side. Okay, DVCPRO tape lids are yellow. Okay, and you can also record, as I mentioned, DVCPRO 50 on that media. And there's where you can find the maximum running time. This is 66 minutes, and there's the Record Save tab. DVCPRO HD tapes have red lids, again, color coding. DVCPRO Summary. It is currently manufactured. The stock is manufactured. You can find decks. It is definitely available. It's still out there. But here's an example now. Look at all these different sizes. DVCAM on the top, DVCPRO High 8 down to itty bitty mini DV. So you can see here kind of the sizes here on this graph. There are many different kinds of small cassettes. So let's go back to the poll. So actually, Jenny, how do we do this poll? Do you bring it in? There we go.
Yeah,
so
so
how
I'm
would
going to go ahead and pull up the three options here. Sorry, I was muted. It takes a second to unmute myself. And I'm afraid I'm going to have to cover up your slide to do that. Let's see. There we go.
Okay, give you all just 30 seconds to fill it out. And then we'll review what everybody polled.
So it looks like there's some obvious picks right here.
Mm-hmm.
All right, it looks like about everyone, we have a few more people clocking in, but I think that's most everyone. Is this what you were expecting to see, Linda?
It's actually, I guess, can I scroll this down? I'm trying to see what the other, okay.
Let's see. So let me know when you want me to move these off.
Okay, so basically what do we have? We have the number one, what people have, if I can see this. People are saying the 3/4 and number, okay, and then the second one, folks are saying the 2-inch. And then let's see here, just to make sure this came out right. Oops. Yes, and they're saying the mini DV is third. Okay, that's really interesting. Well, I agree with everybody who said the U-matic should be transferred first, number one. Actually, yes, if you could remove them, Jenny, I'm sorry, so we can see the slide. Now, again, I'm not talking about the content at all. We're just talking about just looking at the format and the age. Oops, my phone just clicked. Can you all hear me okay? I guess I'm right? Okay, great. Thank you. All right, based on the storage environment and how often it has been used. Okay, the folks said the 3/4-inch U-matic absolutely is from 1975, so it's within that first 10-year period when the stock might not be that good. Even though in the last 10 years it was stored in an excellent environment, before that it was stored in a horrible environment, high temperature, high relative humidity. And it also was heavily used. So definitely, yes, I agree that should be the first, again, content irrespective, that would be the first format to be transferred. Okay, now what folks said should be second was they mentioned that the 2-inch video reel should be transferred, and they said third would be the mini DV. I would probably actually go myself for the mini DV on the metal evaporated stock before the 2-inch video reel. Again, we're not talking about content. And the reason that I would say that is that 2-inch video reel, even though it's the oldest, it has been stored in a very good environment for most of its life, and so it is still within its term of life expectancy. Whereas that mini DV, it's on metal evaporated stock. It's on the older end of a tape as well. It's 15 years old. It's been stored in a high environment, and it was heavily used. And so I would probably want to get that content off that mini DV tape before the 2-inch tape. But again, people could, it depends so much on the content of it, but this is how I would prioritize. But thank you, everybody, for really thinking about it and participating. So let's go on, and I am going to actually skip through these less common formats because, again, I tried to document them well, thinking that I wouldn't have time to cover everything, and so you can look at the handouts and see the pictures of the formats and learn about them. So I am going to skip through and get to the end of the video section. Let's see. Actually, let me see if I can go through. Okay, end of video, literally, not just of that segment, but also about the video itself is really dying. Everybody knows it. Physical video is dying. Everything has to be transferred to digital formats. So does anybody have any quick questions on video format identification?
Linda, I think there's a few questions, not so much on necessarily the ID, and perhaps you'll get to these a little bit later and might want to defer, but there were a few people that had questions on any basic maintenance or cleaning tips for the actual playback machines.
Yes, and actually I believe that there are some good, if you look at the documentation that I have, the handout, you can look at some of those sites and it also gives hints on it. But basically what you need to do is if you have a collection and you believe that, it's older tapes and they could be gumming up the decks, you should be using alcohol to clean them. But be extremely careful that you don't also touch the plastic parts on the deck. You really should go through some training. Don't just open it up and try doing it. You can look online, as I mentioned, and find some guidance on exactly how you should be doing it. But you definitely should be cleaning those decks.
Great. Some other questions that we had go back to when you were talking about preservation and that idea of you really needing to get that flat pack on the tape. And how do you make sure you're actually doing that? Any tips there?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the only way you can do that is actually by playing the tapes, in a deck and just running it, slowly in real time as it goes through the deck so you can get the flat pack. Now, the problem is, though, what then people say on the other hand is sometimes it can be difficult to achieve a totally flat pack. So don't risk wearing out your tape and damaging your tape by playing it too many times. Sometimes just make sure that then it is, rewound either to the heads or to the tails of the tape. But that's the only way to try to get a flat pack, just by actually playing the tape.
So we just want to make sure we're not leaving it in the middle of the tape there, if you're taking something out of a deck. All right.
Yes.
There have already been some discussions about people wanting to perhaps do some reformatting on their own because of the size or scope of their collection. And Philip from New York was asking if there are any thoughts on a good place or a good brand of a professional VHS deck to get.
VHS decks are no longer manufactured. So if you want to, as far as dedicated professional VHS decks, they're just no longer made. So you have to buy a used one. And so if you want to buy a used one, not necessarily just go to eBay to buy one. You might want to go to a place that actually has purchased old decks, and they refurbish them so that you know that it's going to be playing right and it won't damage your tapes. So I don't know. I can mention there are some vendors who actually sell them, but I don't also want to be doing commercials for them. Yes. So I would just say look at the list of vendors who do the transfers, and you can give some of them a call. I wish I could recommend some folks to you, but I feel like I probably should not do that. and call them and see if they have any decks that are available. Because if they're doing the reformatting themselves professionally, then they have extra decks on hand as well as parts, and they know where to find them.
Okay, great. Well, Joanna from Mexico City had a question about LTO tapes and wanted to know your thoughts about using those as the long-term archival storage.
That gets into a very long answer. LTO tape is not the same manufacturer as videotape. It has some similarities, but there are also some very different ones. It depends on the generation. It depends on your infrastructure, and I would love to answer your question, but I feel like I don't have the time to really get into it.
Okay, fair enough. We only
Yeah,
have an hour and a half, so fair enough.
Yeah.
But I will go back, one last question before we go off into the next section, goes back more into the conservation and preservation section. You had mentioned about the fact that the short-term fluctuations in temperature and relative humidity are perhaps more damaging than sustained high temperatures. Can you maybe clarify just the environmental issues a little bit more?
Well, the problem is if there is fluctuation in temperature and relative humidity, then that tape is being stressed just by the environment. It can make it expand, it can contract, it can cause it then to stretch out. So that is why it is actually more dangerous than just having it at, even unfortunately at a high temperature. High humidity is not good, no matter what, if it is consistently in a high humidity environment, especially as I was mentioning 65% and above. I mean, you're destroying the tapes if they're in that kind of environment. They definitely will not last very long. But again, it's why the fluctuating is worse, though, than having something to be, well, okay, it's cold today, and it's fluctuating is worse than having a more consistent format, is because it can actually damage the tapes because of just the physical nature of contracting, expanding and contracting.
Okay, great. Well, we do have some more questions, but we'll save those for the end.
Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so let us jump into optical media. So optical media, there are 4 kinds of formats. There's Laserdisc, CDs, DVDs, and Blu-ray. We're not going to discuss Laserdisc because that was more of a consumer-based distribution format for content. What I want to focus on are the optical media formats where you can actually record content on it, and there might be content on it that you need to preserve, that you have created or acquired. So we'll jump into CDRs first. Now the CDR-ROMs I just mentioned, that is more the commercial distributed format. Those are like your audio CDs that you buy. Those are read-only. Those are manufactured in a different way than the Rs. The content is stamped on, so we're not going to discuss those. There's CDR, which is recordable media, and CDRW, which is rewritable. But again, we're focusing on recordable. Okay, CDRs first were released in 1990, but really they didn't become affordable until the late 1990s. And as you might be using them yourselves in your own organizations, they're used for storing images, audio, and smaller files. And they have a limited storage capacity of up to 700 gigs. So as I was mentioning, the CDR are recordable. You can write on them. CDRW are write and erase. Now, these are not compatible with all CD devices, playback devices. Now, audio CDRs were from the early 1990s, and at that time they made a distinction between the audio and data CDs, mainly just because it impacts the playing devices. But they're really the construction of them, the physical properties are the same as CDR. Oh, I'm sorry, somebody just caught a typo there. Thank you, yes. Megs, not gigs. Sorry about that. Thank you for catching it. Okay. Okay, DVD-Rs, I'm going to first go into the DVDs and then rather than talk about the physical properties yet because they share, CDs and DVD-Rs share some of the same physical properties. So DVD minus Rs were released in 1997 and the DVD plus R was released in 2002. What's the difference between them? Well, basically the plus R was developed to have improved error management, so if there was a skip or something it could correct more easily. Most of the drives today can play both, although more commercial DVD video players favor the -R. The RW is available in both -R and +R. If I see a lot of people, I'm sorry, they're chatting and saying about the gigabytes. No, it's megabytes. I'm sorry about that typo. Okay, so the DVD -R and +R, again, you probably have them where you might be recording yourself. They're a bit larger in size, storage capacity 4.7 gigs. Similar construction to CDRs, but there are two disks that are glued together. So how can you tell if you have an RW or an R? Okay, you can see here, if you can see it in this image well enough, there's an RW there. So you can see this is a -R, this one's -R, and this one is a +R. And this +R is an RW. Okay, so how does this optical media work, the Rs, the recordable ones? So they use a laser. The laser writes data onto what they would call pits that are on the data layer. The data layer in the CDs and DVD-Rs are made of an organic dye. And the dye changes when the data is written on it. Now with the RW, it's a phase-changing film that's used for the data layer rather than a dye, although otherwise the construction is pretty similar to the Rs. The data is written from the inner hub to the outer edge. It follows grooves like an LP, so if you hold up one of these CDs or DVD-Rs at a certain angle to the light, and if you can see that some of the underneath it, it is a darker area. That darker area is the area that is being written. So when the laser is reading the data, then there is a metal reflective layer that is in the media itself, and so it points the light back to the laser photosensor. So just a quick diagram here of the CDR layers. So we have the bottom, which is the substrate, polycarbonate substrate. That's the shiny side of a CD or of a DVD. And then you have the data layer that is sitting on top of that polycarbonate substrate. That's the organic dye. You have the metal reflective layer, which is going to be on CDs. It's made of gold, silver, or silver alloy. There's a lacquer just to go on top of it, and then the label area is on the top where you might actually have a label, or where commonly people would write on it. DVDs are pretty much the same, except it has two polycarbonate substrates, so there's an additional one on top to help keep it stable. And so there's glue in between those two layers. And we're talking just about single sides here. So the RW disc differences, again, is where they're using a film rather than a dye. And the metal reflective layer is aluminum. And the problem with aluminum is that it can oxidize. It can deteriorate a lot faster than any of the gold or silver alloy media that's used in the R media formats. So it definitely is not considered appropriate for long-term storage, the RWs. Okay, now, what are some of the problems here? The substrate, that's the bottom. So the reader is going to be reading from the under. Again, that's the shiny side. If you have smudges and dirt, that's going to, like fingerprints, that's going to block the laser from being able to read the data. Now, little scratches, normally the laser can compensate for minor scratches, but if you have a clump of minor scratches, that acts the same as if it were a fingerprint. It's going to block the laser from reading the information. You can also have moisture that's absorbed into the disk through that substrate area, which can then lead to the metal layer oxidizing. So with the DVD, the related issue to that is that, as I mentioned, there's glue that's holding the two parts together. And so the glue can fall apart, actually. And so the DVD can fall apart, or the glue can fail. It can start deteriorating. And if it starts deteriorating, then that can open entry points for moisture creeping in, which can then help deteriorate that media. So the data layer is the next part. We just talked about the underside of the substrate. Now the data layer is where the dye is. Now the organic dye, again, organic, and so it's susceptible to several problems. And the main one is actually it can fade from UV rays, from light, and also from heat. And if that dye fades, you can't read the data on that disk. So there are three kinds of dye. There's cyanide, which was the earliest dye, and then there's some ways of identifying, as I have here, where depending on the kind of metal, it's going to look a certain color. That can help you identify what the dye might be. But the cyanide dye is the most sensitive to fading of the three kinds of dyes. Phthalocyanine is considered to be more durable than cyanide and probably the most stable, and that's why you'll find it often in what some manufacturers call their archival media. They tend to be using phthalocyanine dye. Then you have azo, and the azo is going to look a bit green or blue depending on the media. Most DVD-Rs use azo dye, and there's some tests. Again, there are different research organizations are testing the dyes and seeing. Again, everybody's always in search of the best long-term storage medium. So they're testing these media, and they think that maybe this could be the most resistant to UV rays. However, again, the phthalocyanine has supposedly the longest life expectancy. So the metal reflective layer, then that's the other part. So as I was mentioning, the gold ones are non-corrosive, and these are the ones that are going to be the archival media. If a manufacturer says it's an archival CD, an archival DVD, they tend to be made out of gold. And they can and the media, the metal reflective layer itself, could last 100 years. Silver and silver alloy itself can be corrosive. Pollutants can impact it. So those media that are made with silver and silver alloy metal reflective layers tend to have a life expectancy just of a few decades. Now, if you have mold on any of your optical media, that usually means that it has an aluminum metal layer, which would be a ROM disk or an RW disk. So what do these look like? How can you determine? So here are images of underneath on the right side of these discs. So on the left you have DVDs, on the right you have CDs. So you can see these DVDs look the same. But we know that the top one is an R and the bottom one is an RW, and that's because on the other side those are the examples I showed you before where you can look to see that it's an RW disc. So that bottom one's on aluminum and the top one then is on a silver alloy. So on the right, then, you have the CDRs, and the one on the top right, which is silver, that is phthalocyanine dye on silver alloy. The bottom one, then, is one of these gold, archival gold CDs, so phthalocyanine on gold. So the problems, then, with the label side. Okay, so the label is literally, again, it's where a label can be affixed, or it is often then where people will be writing. Now, if you have a scratch on the label side, it can harm that metal reflective layer, which can then impact whether the laser can actually read. It's going to bounce back from that metal layer to be able to read the information on it. So if that is harmed, then it might not be able to read the information. And also, if you have a sticky label on it, then that label, the stickiness, can start deteriorating. It can also then start breaking apart, going down into that metal reflective layer as well. Blu-ray is the most recent optical media, and you can use it as a writable medium as well. Released in 2002, and the straight-ahead R was released in 2005. Basically, what the CDs and DVDs were called RW, the Blu-ray products are called RE, for recordable erasable. And so Blu-ray is used for storing larger files and also HD video. It has larger storage capacity. You can see that for single layer, and then for dual layer capacity, it's even larger. Differences are basically, why is it called Blu-ray? It's because the laser is blue-violet. It's a different frequency than DVD, which is a red laser, a red frequency. That's why it's called Blu-ray. The dye, here's the critical thing, the dye in Blu-ray is inorganic, so it's not going to have those fading properties as the regular organic dye that's in CDs and DVDs, except for one of the versions, which is anything that would be LTH. That does use an organic dye. So here are just some images of the different kinds of Blu-rays. You have BDRE, the LTH, which again is the one that has the organic dye, and then the dual layer, which has larger capacity. There's also a version in broadcasting for non-tape media. So they developed out of a Blu-ray product, XDCAM. Sony developed this. It's a Blu-ray-based format. It's used to shoot ENG. It has higher read and write speeds, but it is still a writable and erasable format. So what are the problems that can impact data readability? Well, that organic dye can fade in light and heat. The metal reflective layer can corrode. Media obsolescence, as with everything, poor handling, that's what you can do. So that would be fingerprints and scratches. Writing on the media, the ink and scratch possibility, And then you can also have the danger of erasing files on those RW or RE disks. So what can you do to help these disks live longer? Well, the life expectancy is basically 2 to 100 years. It depends so much, as we were just talking about, the metal layer, the die, the quality of the writing, and the storage environment. I mean, if you store one of these disks in your car on the dashboard in the sun, it's not going to last 100 years. So what can be done to extend the LE? Okay, little steps you can do. You can rehouse them, like with everything else, in inert polypropylene jewel cases. And again, this would be for content that you want to last for a good long time. Remove any paper inserts, same as you do with video. Store upright like books. Don't write directly on the media recording area. So where you should be writing is in this inner hub area here where there's no information. That's this area right here. You could use a water-soluble pen, a very thin one, and write just some kind of identifying mark, like an identifying a unique ID, an item ID, whatever you could use to identify. And of course, in the metadata for that record, then you're going to be tracking exactly what's on the content rather than adding the title or any other kind of information onto the writing area over here. You don't want to add anything to the writing area here. What some archives will do is see this number here. This is the manufacturer number. They'll just track in the metadata the manufacturer number that's already stamped on that inner hub and not even write anything, period. So this becomes on the inner hub even. So this manufacturer number then becomes the unique identifier for the item. Microsteps, again, don't touch that under recording side, because remember, if you have all of the smudges, anything on it, that could then impact the the laser from being able to read the data. To remove fingerprint smudges or other dirt, use a very soft, like a chamois cloth, or even like an eyeglass cleaner cloth, and isopropyl alcohol. Now, if you clean it, you go in a straight motion. You go from the hub out, because when the laser is writing the data, they're going in grooves, like an LP, and so you could inadvertently make a scratch, along that underside that goes in a grooved motion, and the laser could just hitch a ride, basically, on that scratch, and it will stop reading the information that's on the grooves. So go from the inner hub, going out. If you're recording to media, if you're using this actually as your storage medium, don't fill up the disk. Make sure that there are blank space at the edges, because sometimes if there's edge damage, then of course that is going to be damaging the content and you won't be able to read the content that's on the disk, because the media, again, it writes from the hub to the edge out. Don't use RW media. For longer life expectancy, use gold media with thiocyanine dye. Macro environment, then keep out of the light. Keep it away from the light, because those UV rays are going to cause the dye or the data layer to fade. Try to store in archival boxes, and not in cardboard. Use metal shelves like with everything else, not wood. Storage, it can vary. It depends on who you talk to, basically, and all of the different standards bodies. But the temperature basically can be as cold as 41 and up to 68, and the relative humidity 30 to 50. But obsolescence is a critical factor here, because these optical media formats, they're going to become obsolete before the media dies. Being able to play it back is going to be disappearing, even if, they say that an archival medium can last 100 years. Well, there won't be really decks around to play that back in 100 years. So that is a critical problem. So get that content off with any AV media, whether it's videotape, audio tape, optical media. Focus on preserving the content rather than the physical object, but you want to keep that physical object alive as long as possible, of course, so you have the time and the funds to be able to preserve and get that content off it. Copy the files from optical media to hard drives or servers. Just get it off. And I want to say thank you. And I just added a picture of me. They're holding a 2-inch quad case, like as a fashion accessory, basically, so you can see how huge those cases can be. Thanks to all the folks who allowed me to photograph Altrin Technologies and BroadcastStore.com, where I could photograph all those video formats, and then thanks to all the other folks who also provided photographs and information. So that's it with my presentation, so I guess we can open it up for questions.
We have lots of questions for you, Linda.
Oh, no.
As I'm sure you're ready to go. We'll see how many we can take in the next 8 minutes or so. But going to your last point that you just mentioned about preserving the original as best we can, but ultimately there's this need to reformat. A few people had questions over the course of your whole talk about, do you still keep the originals after reformatting? What do you do with these things? Or is it just best to always keep them unless they're completely dead? So what's your take on it?
Okay, this is my personal opinion versus anything that's out there, in literature or in any kind of standard. If you have the storage capacity to hang on to the original media, I would actually hang on to it even after you transferred it, because it also depends on what you've transferred it to. So let's say that you have a very important video file, but then you wound up, I'm sorry, not video file, but a videotape, and you transfer the content into a very low-res video file, digital file. And that might be all you could do today, but maybe in the future you could transfer that videotape content to a better resolution file. So hang on to it. Of course, hopefully it's going to happen very quickly after you've gotten it off into a lower res format. But hang on to it just in case you have the opportunity to do it better in the future, even though while it's sitting on the shelf, that original media is deteriorating. As every second passes by. But once the content is totally gone and there's nothing on it, it's not salvageable, then definitely you don't need to hang on to it.
Okay, great. So a mixed answer there, but
yeah.
So there was also a discussion in the chat box that I thought love to have you weigh in too. Flavia from Boston had said that she heard that Blu-ray discs were going to disappear from the market soon. And have you heard that? And then there ensued some discussion about, well, what's next? What's the next kind of emerging thing that we're going to have to worry about?
Right. Oh boy. Well, the thing with Blu-ray is it didn't have much, uptake in both in well, I guess in like libraries, you have a choice of buying a DVD or a Blu-ray, but again, that's more for commercial releases. So we're talking here more about, for purposes of this discussion, about recordable media. And no, you're correct. I mean, it really has not had much uptake as far as recordable media goes. Every media disappears. I mean, look at all the obsolete formats we just looked at. It's definitely going to be gone. I mean, it will be gone. And there will be another format around the corner. In fact, there is something that was just announced this week about a format that will last 1,000,000 years. But the problem with any format that comes out is that will you have that playback opportunity in the future in 1,000,000 years? Can you play it back? Which is one of the things I've been stressing here about the obsolescence of the playback materials, whether it's optical media or any of these video formats. So the thing is, I think, is to not worry so much about the physical medium that you're going to store it to, what will be a format for recording, but everything's going media-less. Everything has to go digital, which will be the topic of another webinar, another conversation. So if you're transferring content now, transfer it to a digital file, but then make sure you have a digital preservation strategy for keeping those files alive over time.
Linda, this is Jenny, I'm just going to hop in here real quick and pull over a link to the homework assignment for this webinar. And then also I'm going to ask all our folks who are watching in a group, so only one person logged in, but multiple people are trying to earn that certificate of completion. If your group leader could just go ahead and put in your, everyone who's watching with you, that would be great. And we have about 6 more minutes left, so Laura, you have a ton of more questions.
Yes. So I'm just going to go from the top of my list on down as long as we have time, both for videotape and you were mentioning for the optical discs as well, there is this chance for mold. And you had mentioned cleaning techniques for the optical discs, but someone had a question about what do you do with mold on videotape?
For that, I would send it out to a professional cleaner who can take that mold off. Because again, if you don't know what you're doing, because you have to take the tape out of the cassette itself, which again, if you don't know what you're doing, you can damage it. You have to have the appropriate equipment to be able to clean it off and clean it off well. So for that, I would definitely recommend sending it to a provider. of which there aren't that many who can actually get mold off of tapes, but on that handout list that I have of vendors, you can contact any of them. If you call them and contact them and ask them, can you remove mold from videotapes, they will tell you yes or no. They're not going to tell you they can do it if they don't know how to do it.
Okay. We have someone in the group from Germany, and they posted that they said in Germany there's also a format of Video 2000 that was used in the 1980s. Do you have any experience with those?
I do not know what that is. So
it was
that is great.
Case of Stump the Expert there.
Yeah, I'm going to write that down and look it up. Thank you.
So there were a few related questions, and I'm going to ask them just as they were typed so that I don't perhaps misinterpret what people were saying, but they all seem to be related. So there's 3 questions. One was, do you think we should double up on archival by HDD data copy and a physical disk version? And related to that was, what kind of HDD? And then the last one was, where do flash drives fit into all of this?
Oh boy.
Yes.
I would pull in LTO into this conversation as well. I don't know if I'll be stepping on the toes of the reformatting presentation for next week, though, if I answer those questions. I mean, what do you think?
I would say go ahead and answer, because I think next week we're just going to be going into it more in depth.
Okay. Okay. For the HDD medium, the external hard drive, if you want to store content on that, the main thing is also redundancy. Don't just have one copy of a file. You want to have 2, if not 3, but a minimum 2, and preferably it's recommended to have 3 copies on all of this different media. The external hard drives, try to not go with a size that is more than a terabyte, just because there have been some reports about, the larger, I mean, it's really tempting, go get, a much larger terabyte storage device. But there are stories about those that have larger storages where it's basically, it's writing the information around grooves. It's magnetic media, actually, as well. And so they have to make those grooves to be very narrow. They're all squished together really fine, and there's more of a chance to fail. I mean, again, I'm just telling you about reports that have come out about these media. So try to copy them onto hard drives that are no more than 1 terabyte in maximum size. Don't fill up the whole disk again, and have multiple copies. If you go to LTO, then you need to be able to have the technology. Again, you have to keep up with the different generations. So you have, like, with LTO, it's only 2 generations backwards readable and 1 generations backwards writable. So then you have to be able to make sure that your technology plan that you're going to be upgrading every 2 generations to LTO tape index. That's one consideration there, but I could go into a whole lot more about this. Flash drives can be expensive. I mean, they're going to be coming down, but it's, as far as a storage medium, there aren't people who are really using it seriously for storage itself, only flash drives. I mean, they'll be using it within a more enterprise-level storage system, mainly just to help with performance, but not as storage itself. I don't know. Did that answer help?
I think so, and I think that brings us to the end of our time as well. So.
Great. I will go ahead and just jump in here and remind everyone that our next webinar is Monday at 2 o'clock, same place. Linda and Laura, thank you so much. This was a fantastic presentation.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me, and I'm sorry there was just way too much information, but hopefully people can just refer to the resources, the PowerPoint handout.
Well, this will be a great resource down the road, too, and we've had a lot of folks comment that they're going to definitely watch this again. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone who's logged in. We'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.